collection of short stories, Meter Live Button, but it seems like she wanted the window open, so we're gonna wait until she's done with opening the window because she seems overheated. But she's also wearing a blazer, so let's think about that. But yeah, she Paige Walton. Whatever
I'm going to read from my book first. Residency. 1. Louise had been reading her work at underattended events in local bookstores for nearly 3 years before her first short story ever made it into print. Lizards and Lemons was included in the December print issue of an obscure journal based in Winnipeg that prided itself on its specific readership. Though the story was advertised by the journal as Louise's debut, it was the 24th work of serious fiction she had ever written. Due to rapidly declining sales and subscriptions following the publication, the journal switched over to becoming an exclusively online platform. Fortunately, one of the 12 print issues that were sold fell into the hands of an editor for a moderately better-known magazine. The editor showed Louise's story to a friend who was a publisher at a small independent press. The publisher enthusiastically contacted Louise about including some of her work in a short collection of contemporary American fiction. The taste of success was sufficient enough to prompt Louise to leave her day job of 6 years to begin what her sister lovingly referred to as her self-imposed residency. The money that she had squirreled away over the past decade was enough so that she could live and maintain her gym membership for at least 6 months, during which she would attempt to write her first novel. On her last day at work, a small party was held for Louise in the co-working space that her company rented. A dominant office personality played music from his phone and sipped aggressively from a plastic cup. He would never venture out of the 4-foot radius of the device for the remainder of the party. The others chatted nervously and picked at unsalted pretzels and deviled eggs and got drunk on beer from unbranded cans supplied by the co-working organization. The evening's timeline, meticulously crafted by someone in HR, included a gentle roast at the end of the evening. The roast was ill-fated from the start, as Louise kept mostly to herself and did not have friends at work. It's so hot. I have to take it off.
Wait, we can open that window. It's Gordon. Do you want to open that window?
Please come.
Maybe open that window, because it'll create a cross breeze.
Jesus Christ. It's funny because I probably can't read the whole thing, but this is exactly what happens in this book. Those who know, know. Okay. The roast was ill-fated from the start, as Louise kept mostly to herself and did not have friends at work. Thank you so much. Many of Louise's coworkers didn't know who she was until her departure had been announced, so it should have come as no surprise that nobody had prepared material. The room marinated in an awkward silence until Kevin from finance mentioned that he knew Louise was single because she kept a framed photograph of her dead cat at her desk. There was scattered, nervous laughter, and the music was quickly switched back on. Kevin was quietly dismissed from the party and suspended from the office until he completed a mandatory online empathy training at the request of his supervisor. This went on entirely unbeknownst to Louise, who was busy carving the remaining hummus from a Fiesta-ware bowl and contemplating prospective titles for her debut novel. Louise awoke the next morning to a mild hangover in her studio apartment. She rose from bed and walked a few feet to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. As the kettle boiled, she drank 5 full glasses of water in quick succession. She returned to bed with her laptop. Louise sat with the screen of the warm device resting against her knees and opened a new file in WordBeater. As the cursor pulsed on the blank page, the panic rose within her. It was as though the anchor attaching the bed to the rest of the room had been lifted. She was floating freely and without a known destination. It was only 9 in the morning, and already the day felt endless. She might as well vacuum first. I guess I can read something new too. Yay! We'll see. Maybe you won't be doing that. All right, this is called The Expert. The expert was seated at the end of the table, across from the only empty chair. Every 20 minutes, a sweating chef burst through the kitchen door with a steaming dish in their hands, this time a vibrant green puree to cleanse the palate. The expert watched the tureen travel slowly toward her. At the end of the table, she received everything last. Next, a silver chariot of asparagus surfed through the hands of the hungry guests. The expert passed the time by breaking up inconsistencies in a puree with the back of her spoon. The scent of the cooked vegetable reached her first, its movement untethered by gravity. She spooned the 3 remaining limp stalks of asparagus onto her plate, splattering her collection of unattractively shaped hors d'oeuvres in marigold-colored oil. The oblong half-deviled egg appeared suddenly more appetizing than before. Down the table, the actress guffawed and concealed a mouthful of blanched broccoli raw with her gloved hand. An animated guest beside her waved their hands, immersed in an impersonation of a well-loathed political figure. Several other guests tittered. Jewels winked above jiggling breasts. Just before the dinner bell rang, the expert had been subjected to a lengthy conversation with a young person with remarkably straight teeth. The conversation was mostly one-sided. The young person gave a long list of their professional ambitions and goals, then closed the conversation with the solicitation of their current project. Now that the expert was seated, no one spoke to her at all. The young man on her right sat with his body angled toward the other guests, drawn to the conversation at the center of the table. With age, she'd become accustomed to this type of invisibility. The expert tried to picture what her son was doing at home at this very moment. Despite his inquisitive nature, he was a well-behaved and responsible child. If she knew him correctly, he had eaten the soup she'd warmed for him before she left, then spent an hour or 2 listening to his favorite classical music program while reading the World Atlas or Encyclopedia. He always read the books while lying on his stomach, as they were too heavy for him to carry up the stairs. He was likely there now, on the floor with the encyclopedia spread out before him, left foot swishing back and forth as he turned the pages. Sometimes he liked to wear her reading glasses while doing this. I terrible happened. But she never let him keep them on for more than a second. He had exceptional vision and didn't need them to see. She regretted her lack of foresight to hide them before going out for the evening. A maid stepped out of the shadows with a bottle of wine. The expert covered her drink with her palm and shook her head in polite decline. The maid sighed and produced a second bottle of more expensive wine from behind her back. The expert declined again and motioned toward the glass to indicate she was still drinking from it. The maid seemed not to understand. "I just don't want to get, drunk." The maid stared. The expert rolled her eyes and waggled her tongue. The maid stifled a laugh and cast a nervous look around the room. She retreated into the shadows and resumed taking swigs from the expensive bottle. The expert looked at the clock above the mantel. By now, her son would be getting sleepy. He'd trade the encyclopedia for a lighter picture book, like 7 Angry Pigs, or another one of his favorite origin stories. For him, this was a comfort mechanism. The books were far below his advanced reading level. Book tucked under his arm, he'd pull the step stool over to the sink and brush his teeth in the mirror, spending way more time on the top row than the bottom. Perhaps, in her absence, he'd be mindful to pay attention to the back teeth. Then he'd retire, not to his own bed, but to hers, where she'd find him asleep later. He would